Davis brothers, ladies and gentlemen. All the holiness.
Yes.
It's all the holiness.
And then one sinner. Excuse me. So, for those of you that were here at the beginning of GraceLife, you know there was a core group of people that came together and really kind of helped me and supported me when I didn't know what I was doing, really. And one of them is my friend Daryl Davis. We are related in Christ, but we're not actually related. A lot of people make that mistake because, you know, I don't know why they make that mistake. We don't look anything alike. Yeah, Mom sent me the check. But just to let you guys know, I really love this man. He has been an encouragement to me. We were on staff together at Covenant Life here in town for a long time. And when we started GraceLife, I said, Daryl, I'm going to need a coach. I'm going to need somebody to hold me accountable theologically. And he did such a great job of that. I don't know if you know that. Still to this day, every week, Daryl's my sermon coach. We talk every Friday at 10:30, and we go over my notes to make sure they're in line with Scripture and other things. And so a lot of the things you don't like in the sermon are a direct result of sermon coach. But one of the founding pastors of GraceLife Sarasota is back visiting today to preach, and I get to sit down for the first time in a long time and critique a sermon and criticize it. Daryl Davis, come on up, brother.
It's good to be back here and seeing everybody. I'm enjoying Pennsylvania and Hershey, PA. You know, I grew up there. Once saw a guy drenched in chocolate. Yeah, I worked at the Hershey factory. Actually, true story there. But we won't get into that because what I want you to do today is to think, how many people here ever saw the movie What About Bob? Oh yeah, a lot of people have seen What About Bob. Yeah, okay, well, for those of you who haven't, it's a story of a guy who needs therapy, Bill Murray, because he has all these phobias. And so he goes to see this therapist, Richard Dreyfuss, and it gets funny. Of course, Bill Murray's funny anyway, but it gets funnier and funnier as he intrudes and barges into the life of the therapist. Dr. Leo Marvin is his name, Richard Dreyfuss plays. And the family's in New Hampshire on vacation, and who shows up but Bob? See, and everybody loves Bob except Dr. Leo Marvin, who's trying to get away from him, and it just gets funnier and funnier. And the family welcomes him to the point where one night he ends up staying overnight, sleeping in the son Ziggy's room with Ziggy, and in Dr. Leo Marvin's pajamas. And Dr. Leo Marvin can't find his toothbrush, and of course we know why. Because Bob has been using it. There's Siggy.
Bob?
Yeah?
Are you afraid of death?
Yeah.
Me too. And there's no way out of it. You're going to die. I'm going to die. It's going to happen. And what difference does it make if it's tomorrow or in 80 years? Much sooner in your case. Do you know how fast time goes? I was 6, like yesterday.
Me too.
I'm going to die. You are going to die. What else is there to be afraid of? Bob?
Yeah?
Are you afraid of death?
Afraid of death. Well, you know, that's a question that too many of us have just put in the back of our minds and never really think of, except the kind of academic way, you know. Like so many things in life, there's a bad way to think about things and a good way to think about things. How could there be a good way to think about death? You know, here's Siggy, he's a little obsessed with it for a young kid, it seems, and yet I have known many cases of children who see that very thing. At a young age, they recognize this. And they think about it. There's a guy by the name of Moses, who you may have heard of. Not Charlton Heston, don't get me wrong. This is Moses. And he wrote the only psalm that's by him in the book of Psalms. And guess what subject it's about? It's about how God is great and eternal, and next to him our lives are just so brief. They come and they go. And so this psalm is a meditation on the brevity of life and all of the problems that are associated with death. And it's really like a conversation. One of the great things about Psalm 90, it's so artistic. It's about a conversation that Moses is having with God, where he's thinking through things. And about 2/3 of the way through the psalm, there's only 17 verses. In verse 12, he says these words, "So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom." That's what I want to talk about today, because that sentence, just one little sentence, is so loaded with meaning for us in a positive way. Not in a negative way, not in a way of denial. And so what I'm looking for is that you would walk out of here taking inventory of your own mortality, because it can make you wise. It doesn't say it will make you depressed. It doesn't say it will make you stupid. It says it will make you wise. And that's counterintuitive, right? So let's jump in here and take a look at that. Taking inventory is what I call this, because in a way, that's what Psalm 90:12 is trying to get you to do. To take inventory, but not any old way. You know, it wants you to do it in a good way. And so that's why I put here, it's about getting smart, really, because that's the healthy way to approach it. So, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about this verse, but I want to talk about it in 3 ways. I want to first address the subject that you need to be open to being taught. A lot of times we're not open. You know, sometimes people want to tell us something and we don't want to hear it. But if we open ourselves to God, he can teach us the right way to think about this. And then secondly, I want to talk about inventory, taking inventory of what you have. Because, you know, death, when people think about death, they always think about what they're not going to have. But that's not how I want to approach this. And thirdly, I want you to realize there's a reward in this process. And so I want you to come expecting that reward. Okay? So let's take a look at this first one. Open yourself to be taught. Look at, when you say death, it's just awkward. See, that I get that idea of being open to be taught from the verse that begins, "So teach us." Here's Moses, and he's saying, you have to teach us this. We don't approach this the right way. You're the only one who can give us the kind of insight and the approach that we need. So I'm telling you right now, God, I don't know how to approach this subject in a healthy way. And so teach me. You know, everybody recognizes the fact that sort of death is a bad thing. I mean, that's the way we talk about it. And in the Bible, you know the story from Adam and Eve of how God said, the day you disobey me and eat from that tree, that's the day that you will die. And that's the day then death is introduced into the world. And so theologians, as well as ordinary Bible reading people, call that the curse. And so the idea of associating the curse with death, it's just the two go hand in hand. Oh, death, yeah, that's the curse on the human race because of our sin and rebellion against God. We've rebelled against our Creator, and so there's the curse of death that's placed on the human race. But an interesting thing that you see all through the Bible from beginning to end is that wherever there's a curse, there's a blessing. In other words, God doesn't just work in a negative way. There's always a positive to things. And so you think to yourself, well, what could possibly be positive about death? Let me give you a hint as to where I'm going with this. If there was no death, how many of you would be here today worshiping God? You know? I mean, doesn't it sort of get your attention? Doesn't it sort of make you think, yeah, what is life? What should I be doing? Who am I? What's it all about? I mean, some people go through life oblivious, powerful people, able to control others, making lots of money, and they get to the end, and then what do people say? What does he have? You can't take it with you. Gets to the end, and he's humbled. He's humbled because he dies just like Ziggy and everybody else, you know. See, it teaches you something if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. But if you listen to God, you learn even more from this. I'm not talking about listening to Buddha or to Muhammad or to the horoscope. I'm not talking about listening to biologists or psychologists or the latest research on the subject of death. Not talking about going to Yale or Harvard or the University of Southern California to study this. Not talking about, paying attention to what it says about death on Facebook and what the politicians want us to believe. I'm talking about going to God to be taught by Him about this subject. It's such an obvious thing in a way. After all, He knows it. He invented it. And so that's the first point that I want to make. That you can have a healthy meditation on death, not an obsessed one, not an oblivious one. See, usually we work in extremes. Oh, death is just like falling asleep, that's all. Death, how can there be a God if there's death? It's horrible. Death, babies dying, it's terrible. See, either we walk, I don't care if we're going to die. I'm going to take as many people with me as I can. I mean, either we tend to be cynical about death or we tend to be oblivious about it. But there's a third way, God's way. He wants us to think like Him on this subject. So that's why I say take inventory of your own mortality, because it can make you wise. That's our first point. Our second point is take inventory of what you have. That's what he means when he says, teach us to number our days. He's not talking about that you check them off. Well, let's see, how many days have I been like 365 times 50 times 40, whatever, What's that? Oh, that's coming. That's not what he's talking about. The odds are an actuarial table. He's not talking about that. When he says to number your days, he's saying assess what you have. Assess what God's been given to you. You see, it's a gift from God. Life is a gift from God. That's why the Bible can say, be thankful to God in every circumstance. Because God's in control and God has given this to you and something's going on. And if you don't feel like something good is going on, then you can't see it God's way. And that's common. All of us have experienced horrible things and we say, how can God be in this? But God's doing something and He knows what He's doing and we don't. And so it pays for us. Nobody else does. Who are you going to go to? Who are you going to go to who's going to give you the secret of life, the mysteries of it all? I mean, the Buddhists, they just say, well, it's an illusion, Just a dream. Don't worry about it. It's not reality. Well, thanks a lot. It feels like reality to me. The optimists, they'll say, hey, things will get better. There's a silver lining in every cloud. Where are you going to go to assess the days that God has given you? Who's going to tell you what it really means, what it's really about? Well, there's a good purpose here that God has at work. And that's what I want you to see, to have that awareness. Now, this person here in the little bundle of joy, what are you laughing for? That happens to be me. That's me and Mom and Dad. I was the firstborn. Behind me, there's a house that I don't know anything about, except that was my great-grandmother's on my dad's father's side. Anyway, the point is that you think at the moment, man, I've got my whole life ahead of me. And you don't even know what you're saying, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I got my whole life ahead of me. What does your whole life ahead of you mean? I mean, we know that we don't want to just be negative. I had a dear friend who was an elder in the church. And he says, yeah, but we should be positive, right? And I go, I don't know. Being realistic, how positive is that? And he goes, yeah, but isn't our Christians supposed to be positive? You see, what I was getting at was there's a way to be positive for the right reasons, and then there's a way to be positive that you're just whistling in the dark. And if you're in touch with God, what God is telling you as you look at the days that He's given you and you look at your life and realize life is a gift from God, then things change in the way you look at what's happening around you. Here's another picture. I knew you wanted to see slides of my family. See, that's me there. I got an airplane and I'm going, at least that's what my parents are telling me. And grandma and grandpa on the right, and great-grandma and great-grandpa, well, grandma on the left. And I knew all these people because none of them died until I was about age 9 or somewhere around there. They started to die. But nobody knows who they are. I mean, you don't know who they are. I know who they are, but soon I'm going to be dead, and then nobody will know who they are, except maybe my sisters, but they've got foggy memories even more than me. Mom and Dad's 92 now, can't walk around, can't see very well. Mom, she's 90, she's got a bad heart. Teach you to number your days. What does that mean? You got to have some awareness of what you have, what you don't have, what's real and what isn't real, what's an illusion, what is an illusion. How many lies have I been believing that, well, life is just what you make it. Life's a bowl of cherries, on and on again. All these proverbs that people have invented to try to deal with this subject. If you number your days and look at them and see what you're accomplishing, you're going to get frustrated because what you've accomplished is going to disappear. My grandfather had a farm. I know where that farm is. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been on it. My great-grandfather, I should say. The old guy on the left. I remember him. What did his life count? What did he accomplish forever and ever? I can go around town, I can show you some buildings, and it has people's names on it. They donated it. They paid for it. It's a memorial to them. And you might remember them, but nobody's going to remember Nevin Sittler or me, Daryl Davis. Nobody's going to. 200 years from now, no one will know who Daryl Davis was. Or you, for the most part. Unless, as it says at the very last verse of this psalm, Lord, establish the work of our hands. Yea, Lord, establish our work. All our work crumbles and comes to nothing eventually on this earth. But believe it or not, God can make it last forever, just as he can make you last forever. That's what the resurrection was about last Sunday that Joe preached on. Teach us to be wise about what we have. Establish the work of our hands. See, that's part of numbering our days and being realistic. That God gives us this gift of life, and he gives us the choice of what are we going to do with that? Are we going to submit it to the Lord and live under his rule, or are we going to say, oh, I'm going to do what I want and try to build a monument to myself? That's why I say you got to take inventory of your own mortality. If you do that, it can make you wise. Finally, taking inventory of your own mortality means expecting the reward. Point number 3. Expect the reward. What is the reward? That you may get a heart of wisdom. By doing point 1 and 2, you get something. You get something that's rare. You get something that doesn't happen naturally. You get wisdom. You can see the way things really are. That's one of the great advantages of wisdom. That's one of the things that it means. You know, in the Bible, the word wisdom really is about the skill for living. Now, when I say the skill for living, maybe you think of carpentry, or maybe you think of management, or all the other skills. But you see, it's not those that are, it's the skill of living. It's the big picture that's in view. And when we read the Bible, what's its goal? But to make us wise, so that we see what's real, to separate fact from fantasy, to separate illusion from reality, to give us certainty and confidence in the midst of fear and change. And that's why we read the scriptures, so we can get in touch with what's real and what isn't. And to be taught by God means you're going to get that kind of wisdom. So many people deal with life by developing a cynical attitude. I used to tell my wife, you know, when I'm shaking hands with people after church and they say, good sermon, you know, it wasn't so uncommon to get the woman to come up and go, the wife, go, that was really a great sermon. And the guy would go, that was really good. Thank you. And I used to say to her, see, guys are cynical. They're thinking in their heads, yeah, that was good, but it doesn't really work. See? Of course, the women, they got their own problems. They're saying, oh, I got to try harder. Right. Okay, so they got guilt, and men got cynicism. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a third way. I'm talking about being taught by God. I want to present to you a contrast here of what I mean, how this works. You know, we say, how could God ever do these horrible things that we see happening on earth? And you know, and you get cynical about it. And you can't deal with it. I want to show you a clip from the movie Troy. All right? This is about Achilles. And Achilles is the hero, see? And he's about to do battle. Achilles is about to do battle with a guy, some giant who's come out to challenge him. It's sort of like David and Goliath, right? So this giant comes out from the opposing army. And you're not going to get to see it, I'm sorry. Aww. Oh, it's a good scene. Go home and watch it on your own time. But what you're going to see is Achilles being wakened and informed by the servant boy. And the servant boy engages him in conversation.
Are the stories about you true? They say your mother is an immortal goddess. They say you can't be killed.
I wouldn't be bothering with the shield then, would I?
A Thessalonian you're fighting. He's the biggest man I've ever seen. I wouldn't want to fight him.
That's why no one will remember your name.
Yeah, kid, that's why no one will ever remember your name. Stop. Yeah, I mean, you know, there he is saying, yeah, nobody's going to remember your name, kid, because you won't fight this guy, but they'll remember my name. I could just see Jesus showing up on the scene. What would he say in that situation? He would say, that's what you want? You want people to remember your name? Okay, that's what you get. That's it. They remember your name now. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows you personally. Nobody cares about you. But they remember your name. That's what you got. You wanted it, you got it. See, it seems like it's wisdom, but it isn't. It's stupidity. Who wants that? You don't want just people to remember your name. You want to count for something. You want to be real. You want to be alive. And so I thought that was a great example of earthly wisdom. You know, having people remember your name. Compare that now with a phone call that I got back in 2016. A dear friend who was living in North Carolina was dying. And some of you may know his name, Dick Rostoven. And he called me one day, and I wasn't there to answer the phone. And so he left a message, and I recorded it, and this is part of what he said.
Hey, Daryl Davis, this is Dick Rostoven calling. A name from out of the past, soon to be in the past. Just wanted to call and tell you I love you.
So there he is saying, a name from the past, soon to be in the past. See, he's taking inventory. I mean, Achilles numbered his days, but he didn't gain any wisdom from it. Achilles knew he wasn't immortal, but he didn't get any wisdom from it. Here's somebody in the same boat. He knows that he's dying. Listen to what he has to say here.
I cherish the times that we had together. I cherish the fellowship. I just cherish you. And I'm praising God because God is so good to me. And he has just given me such peace and joy and calm. And, you know, I'm really happy. I'm just really, really happy. And I want to let you know that. And I didn't want to leave here before I said goodbye to you. And God gave me this opportunity to say goodbye. So,
And that's something. You know, I recorded that, and I said, I got to keep that forever and ever. I mean, that is just one of the best phone calls I ever got, one of the best voice messages ever left. Here he is. He's got peace. He's got joy. He's calm. He's got his reward. He's wise. He's taken inventory. And it's all working out for the best. This is the heart of wisdom. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. That means everything we do flows from the heart. It flows from a wise way of looking at life. Wisdom is the skill for living. And it shows up. It shows up in people's lives. It shows up in the Apostle Paul. This is what he says in 2 Corinthians 4:16. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away. You know where I see that? I see that every week in my parents. They're getting weaker and weaker. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory. See, the suffering is light, but the glory is heavy. It's beyond comparison as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. Taking inventory of your own mortality can make you wise for what this life has in store for you. Paul said this, for to me to live is Jesus Christ, and to die is so much better. That only makes sense if you know who Jesus is. The one who gladly took inventory of his life. He said, my time has not yet come. And then his time did come. And he went to the cross. He says, I have the power to lay down my life, and I have the power to take it up again. That's who I want to be connected to. Paul said, no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor anyone imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. See, you can't imagine this. When you were 5 years old, could you imagine what sex was? You're 5 years old now when it comes to heaven. You have no idea. You can't imagine. Choose to take an inventory of your life and give it all to the Lord. Let's pray, shall we? Lord God, I thank you that Moses thought about all of this long before we were on this earth, thousands and thousands of years ago. And that these words are recorded for us, saved, so we can think about and meditate on ourselves. And ask your blessing now as we leave this building and go about our business this week. In Jesus' name, amen.